Here at home, I've got a lot of fun mugs. I've got a Dog Dad mug. What else do I have? St. Andrews, New Brunswick, Canada mug that was made in Yarmouth, Maine.
Ooh.
I've got the Skaters Gonna Skate mug, Matt, and for this reason only, Ricky Simone was originally supposed to be taking on Brian Kelleher back in January. He decided, well, if Kelleher can't make it, Skaters Gonna Skate, and I'm going to fight Gaetano Pirello. And Matt, in that fight, it was an interesting one because Ricky Simone absolutely dominated that fight. And if you look at it, for Gaetano Pirello, really, his only mantra could have been, well, every fight starts on the feet, and I'm a striker. And yeah, that's true, but Ricky Simone took him down 7 times in that fight, absolutely dominated in that one interim fight. So listen, Ricky Simone in that fight looked pretty good. He did get struck with a couple of tight shots, especially when you know Ricky Simone's going to be coming in for that double leg. He leaves his head to the side. Gaetano kind of throwing up some knees, throwing up some shots in the entry. But overall, Ricky Simone, good fight. You get a finish. You get a little bit more money. You get to add to that Reebok total. If you keep fighting more, you get the peanuts until April when they switch over to Venom. But overall, now we get the fight that we were really waiting for, and a very well-matched and evenly matched fight between Ricky Simone and Brian Kelleher. And I love this fight stylistically because Ricky Simone's a good wrestler. We all know that. The Ray Borg fight. Yeah. But overall, Ricky Simone's a good wrestler, and he causes just about everybody, Marabdashvili included, problems. Brian Kelleher might not have the best defensive wrestling. If you go look over at UFC stats, he has decent takedown defense. If it's above 60%, we have a good sample size. I like it. But from Brian Kelleher, he has one X factor that you can always stymie a wrestler with, and that's guillotine chokes.
Brian Kelleher not afraid to jump the gilly, and it's something you gotta respect, especially against a guy like Ricky Simone, because you know what Ricky Simone's gonna do. And here's the thing, I've got to note this about the Gaetano Pirello fight. I said if Ricky Simone's gonna lose that fight, he's gonna go out there and do what Ricky Simone does. He's gonna strike too much. He didn't do that in that fight. He knew his game plan, and that is something that I really like to see from Ricky Simone, because that's been my big knock against him throughout his career. He's a great wrestler and a phenomenal grappler. Why the hell would you ever throw hands with anybody? Because that's where you do fall into trouble. Guys can outstrike you. Goodness, Ray Borg, you had to wrestle him because he was volume striking you on the feet. And listen, it's nothing against Ray Borg, but when I think of how Ray Borg wins a fight, he's going to scramble you. He's the one who's going to try to wrestle you. He's not going to throw boxing combinations on the inside and look to be defending takedowns, but that's where Ricky Simone found himself in that fight. And this is great matchmaking because Brian Kelleher just really counters a lot of what Ricky Simone does well. Ricky Simone, really good at takedowns. Brian Kelleher, great at submissions that defend takedowns. Ricky Simone, he does get hit, especially by punches. Brian Kelleher is a pretty good boxer himself, and I do think Brian Kelleher has underrated power. That's something that really has to be talked about in this fight. We saw Uriah Faber at like 39 put down Ricky Simone, and yes, Uriah Faber, one of the greatest, we'll say lighter weight class fighters of all time. Under 155, I would say Uriah Faber, one of the all-time greats. But the fact that he knocked out Ricky Simone in 50 seconds really does worry me. And I know a lot of people who love Ricky Simone. I know a lot of people who think he's going to go on to do great things in the bantamweight division.
Other than Josh Hart, who's a writer over at FightNightPicks.com, who's really high on Ricky Simone.
There's a lot of people who are big on Ricky Simone. He's a good wrestler. He's a handsome kid. He speaks well. He does have some of those X factors.
Former LFA champ.
Chael Sonnen loves Ricky Simone. But this is a really hard fight for Ricky Simone, and the odds, there's a big discrepancy in them for how hard of a fight Brian Kelleher is. He's really hard to take down. He's not easy to hit clean unless you are a guy like John Lineker. It is a little disrespectful, at least from the oddmakers' point of view, of where they have this fight. Because for me, I don't see Ricky Simone being a 2.5 to 1 favorite against Brian Kelleher. He's got the submission game. He's got the power in his hands. I'm not saying it's not a winnable fight for Ricky Simone by any means. I think, of course, he can out-wrestle Brian Kelleher, but this is a very winnable fight for Kelleher.
That's true, and for me, if you want to see the blueprint for Ricky Simone, you have to fight the fight of your life like Cody Stamann did when he fought Brian Kelleher. And obviously, we talked about that in the lead-up for the Cody Stamann fight against Askar that fell apart in the 11th hour last weekend. But the point being that Cody Stamann in that fight, his brother just passed away. Like, he had switched camp. There were so many different circumstances around that one. And Cody Stamann looked amazing in that fight. Like, there was an aura around him. Ricky Simone has to fight like that against Brian Kelleher to be able to get a win. Because how do you beat Brian Kelleher? Well, either you out-volume him on the feet and you defend his takedowns, or you stick and move. Like, there's very few ways to beat Brian Kelleher. He has really, really sneaky hooks. He can switch stances a little bit, but primarily you see him walking people down, hitting them with a strong hook. And if he ever pulls guillotine, again, you look at the Ode Osborne fight, he's able to get him down to the mat, no grapple him. You look at the fight against Ray Rodriguez, both of them threw one strike, and then it's Brian Kelleher submitting him. So for Brian Kelleher, definitely a lot of finishes on his record. Obviously, he's had a ton of fights. I mean, 33 pro fights so far. You talk about the level of competition, too. If you go back to his days with Bellator, Jimmy Rivera, we're talking Andy Main, a guy that's fought with Bellator in the past, the loss there. He beats Julio Arce with Ring of Combat. His UFC debut, Uri Alcantara, and he submits him. Uri Alcantara, I know if you go back and you look at his record, like the fight against Luke Sanders, Brian Kelleher, Corey Sandhagen, but Uri Alcantara, very, very well-known grappler in MMA. That's a great win. A loss to Marlon Vera by submission, no shame. You beat Damian Stasiak. You beat Henan Brow, greatest bantamweight of all time. You lose to John Lineker. All right.
He lost bad to John Lineker, but here's the good news. Ricky Simón doesn't really strike.
No. You lose to Montel Jackson. That was a fluky fight. That was a really weird one. You beat Osborne. You beat Hunter Azure. And that, to me, is a perfect Brian Kelleher fight, especially in this one, because what's Hunter Azure good at? He's a decent striker. He's a pretty good wrestler. And in that fight, Hunter Azure looked like $1 million in the first round. And then he fell off a cliff in the second round. You have to hope that Simón will do that. But Simón doesn't go away like that.
No, exactly. And really, our breakdown up until this point, we've laid out a pretty good game plan for Brian Kelleher. Here's the issue. Ricky Simón is like a wet blanket when he does decide to really incorporate his wrestling game plan. And again, that's the best version of Ricky Simón that you're ever going to see. If he did just fight like Cody Stamann, he'd probably go on and have a very long and successful career. Because when you look at the losses. Uriah Faber cracks him with a big shot. No big deal. Anyone can get caught. Rob Font, though, just defended his takedowns and outstruck him on the feet. And I understand Rob Font's a very technical boxer. He does have Brian Kelleher can't do the things too that Rob Font can. So again, it's not like that fight's a great one to go off of either. But that Ray Borg win, I understand it's a win for Ricky Simón. But if you barely beat Ray Borg, who should be a flyweight moving up in weight, and stylistically you match up really well against him, that's tough, because Brian Kelleher can do all those things Ray Borg does. He's just bigger and he hits quite a bit harder. So if those holes there are there for Ray Borg to hit you on the feet, I think Brian Kelleher can take advantage of some of those, but I still see this fight being very heavy with Ricky Simón up against the cage, wearing out the arms of Brian Kelleher. Kelleher can get a submission, but I do see this as Ricky Simón's going to take down Brian Kelleher, just be heavy on top and not risk jumping any really risky positions, and he should be able to win a decision this way. If there's a finish in this fight, though, I do feel comfortable saying that Brian Kelleher would probably be the one finishing Ricky Simón.
The thing that surprised me, and listen, we throw the stats up there, and inside baseball, it has to be both fighters have more than 3 fights for me to put the stats up there. So you might be wondering why some do and why some don't. That's the reason why. But the one stat that I looked at in this fight and I went, holy crap, Ricky Simón averaged 7.07 takedowns per 15 minutes. And like I said, he had 7 in the 2 rounds that he fought Gaetano Pirello. And even if Pirello got back up, he kept doing it and kept doing it and he kept him down. Now, again, Pirello, classically trained striker, and listen, he wasn't really living the Dolce Vita like the Ryan Paris song, and yes, that's a terrible, terrible Italian-Belgium reference to poor old Gaetano Pirello, and I love that song. But overall, in that fight, Ricky Simón looked good. I think that was a good tune-up going into this fight, especially due to the fact that Simón, if you look at it, hadn't fought against Ray Borg until about May of last year. So you need something to really shake the rust off. For Brian Kelleher, his last time out, again, the Ray Rodriguez fight, that was back in August. This fight was booked a few different times last year. Unfortunately, Simón had a cornerman that tested positive for COVID. That's why Ray Rodriguez came in. If you looked at Brian Kelleher, he was shuffled around. We had done a prediction for him to fight Kevin Natividad. Then on late notice, we did the Ray Rodriguez one. And then these guys were supposed to fight UFC on ABC 1, but Brian Kelleher tested positive for COVID. So COVID, you took this from us a couple times. Now we get it here. But again, you look at the odds in this one. I know you were surprised. I was as well. Ricky Simón opened a -300 favorite, now -261. For Brian Kelleher, open +240. He's now a +208. And over on Tapology, we have a decent sample size to kind of compare with. 564 total votes, 83% Simón, 84% by decision. I'm in agreement with the odds, the fans, yourself. I think that Ricky Simón, if he can rinse and repeat with the takedowns, however, as we laid it out, the thing that Ricky Simón does when he goes in for his takedowns, He's not a big, like, Greco-Roman type wrestler. He's not like your Marco Madsons out there, like your Gilbert Burns going for, like, judo throws and a lot of upper body throws. Ricky Simón will go for a single, but mostly a double. And when he goes in for a double, he usually moves to his right-hand side. It's almost like when you're going in rugby, you aim for the legs, and you try and hit on the side. You throw your shoulder in and your head to the side. Ricky Simón will throw his head to his side, almost like a rugby tackle. Brian Kelleher, excellent with guillotine. So if he pulls and gets a guillotine submission, I would not be surprised in the least. I don't love the odds on Simón, but I'm picking Simón.
Yeah, I don't love the odds on Simón, but this fight is most likely going to be Ricky Simón, just rinse and repeating, taking down Brian Kelleher. I understand, listen, Brian Kelleher might get some of those Nick Lentz, Movsar Evloev guillotines where you look at it and it's like, wow, that's really tight. I really doubt he's going to be able to catch Ricky Simón with any of them. I like Simón by decision.
Matt, both of us going with Ricky Simón. I know Josh Hart out of Vancouver, Washington with Fight Night Picks is going to be happy with that one. Go out and check out his work, fightnightpicks.com. He puts together the betting guides, the amalgamations of the predictions. He's doing great work, the Lord's work over there. But yeah, overall, both of us going with Ricky Simón. Really looking forward to this card. We got a lot of great prospects coming up. And in our main event, Kamaru Usman's taking on Gilbert Burns. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, man. As we always say, let's get into it.